Justin, thank you for taking the time out to talk to me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Man, what is it like having your movie be number one on Hulu right now?
It's pretty surreal. I live in Toronto. I'm in Canada, so we actually don't have Hulu here. We have Disney Plus. So it's on Hulu in the US, but it's on Disney Plus in 105 other countries around the world. And
Really? You
it's
got you guys only have Disney Plus over there? We have
yeah, Hulu's
both.
an American streamer. But they use Disney Plus to deliver to all of the regions. So it's in 155 regions, 106 countries and 40 languages.
Wow.
And so I can see, you can go online, you can see the analytics, you can see, which countries are playing it, and where it's popular, and how it's holding up, and it's very, very surreal.
Wow. I did not know that. I learned something today. So this movie came from your 2018 short.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the progress going from a short to an actual feature film that is distributed everywhere?
The process was a long one for this film because telling a story about a sentient murderous pumpkin, it seems like an obvious idea. It seems like an idea that's a no-brainer, but trying to actually work out a script that makes sense, that is grounded, and that actually I wanted to make, that's realistic to make within our means as well, is just very challenging. And so it was a long process of writing and working with different versions of the script and trying to get the story right. And eventually we finally landed on a story that I liked, and then we got hit with the strikes, and before that
Oof.
hit with the pandemic, and delay after delay. So it was a long process of script writing, and then once the script was right, we got greenlit, and then within 5 months we delivered the movie.
Wow. Within five
Extremely
months.
fast production. We just shot this in April this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
This movie was just all around phenomenal to way it's shot, the effects, because I know you're not a big CGI guy.
That's right.
And I wish more directors were like that because it feels like more horror movies are just CGI heavy, CGI heavy, CGI heavy. But what got me the most about this film was the kills. The kills were phenomenal. One kill in particular made me squirm a little bit, which when well, I forget his name. He gets his hand cut off, and then he gets shoved in his mouth.
That's Shane, played by Jonah Lees. Yeah.
I'm like, wow. I'm like, I have never been grossed out by a film, but that particular kill was just it for me. So, you're whatever you're doing, please continue because we need more horror movies like this.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. The idea was to go with practical effects in camera as much as possible, and this movie is very challenging because it's just a foam puppet, right? This pumpkin is, to bring it to life practically. It's a puppet, and there's actually four versions of this puppet. One of them had animatronics built into it. There was other ones that were, one had the shotgun blast in the side of it, and there was another one that was only for top angles where you could pull lines through it and do kind of reverse photography angles. The goal was to do it practically in camera as much as possible, but because it is such a difficult thing to do, to make this puppet run around, it's basically a Muppet. This is
Yeah.
a Muppet that scalps people and kills people. And it seems so like fun and obvious, but then trying to actually do that is extremely challenging practically. So we did as much in camera as possible, and then took a look at, in post production, to see what was working, what wasn't, and certain things were not possible for us to do practically. And so there's CGI, obviously, that's augmenting this Muppet, but that's that was the approach. The idea for me was to create a film that feels like a monster movie or a creature feature from the 90s or from the early 2000s, that feels a little timeless. And in order to create a timeless feel, you really have to keep everything in camera and keep it practical as much as possible.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this. It felt like Evil Dead meets Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. That's the idea that I got after watching this.
That's pretty much bang on. I mean, my pitch from the beginning, even in our pitch deck, was it's actually like Tremors and like Gremlins meets Evil Dead. It's like, these movies like Tremors and Gremlins that use puppets. Like you've seen Tremors, right?
Yeah,
there's a lot of puppetry in that. You know, when the creature, when the graboids bust through the basement brick wall, that's
Yes.
like a miniature puppet. And
What?
yeah, when you watch that, it's a miniature, and it's I just love the practical effects in Tremors, and obviously Gremlins is probably one of the greatest puppet movies ever made.
I'd have
And
to
I
agree
grew
with
up
that.
obsessed with those movies. And with this, we were using a much smaller budget here, and this is much more. This is a very much an indie, even though it's on Hulu and it's put out by Disney. This was done very much like a low budget indie film, and
Really?
that's what these short to feature sort of programs are over there at Hulu. They make these Huluween specials where they give filmmakers a chance to create a short film, and then there's been this program there to sort of turn these into features if they can get a script put together. But they're lower budget. They're meant to be films coming out of these short films and providing opportunities for short filmmakers. But they don't throw a ton of budget at it. These are very
Yeah.
much low budget. So we're something like these movies have much bigger budgets. This is a made for streamer Halloween special. And for me, as a filmmaker, my approach and my inspiration was very much taking the passion that I have for these types of '90s monster movies that use puppets and use practical effects, and to create something for a modern audience. But it takes place in the '90s. It's leaning into '90s filmmaking techniques, and it's just trying to create a fun new Halloween creature that
Yeah.
hopefully we can do more of. But yeah, this is very much done like an Evil Dead type of movie where it's so low budget. Literally there's two creature design artists, creature effects, special makeup effects artists that I work with that did a bulk of the work. Two people built all the puppets, did all the gore and effects, and then we had two other puppeteers on site that were helping hands. But this was
Wow.
a team that should have been like 15, 20 people. But
Wow.
that's why I love this type of movie. This is a handmade small horror film that Hulu got behind 100%. They love the idea of doing it, with this low budget horror mentality. And you can when you see this movie, it feels handmade, and that's all intentional. Every decision was, can we keep that like guerrilla filmmaking roots in something that's going to be released into like a couple 100 million households.
Yeah.
Literally between Disney Plus and Hulu, it reaches like 200 million households. So
And
wide release, but can it be done?
wow.
But can it, but done with the indie film spirit? That's
Oh
what
yeah.
it is.
I've always loved indie films. I think I would take a movie like yours over any other horror movie we have today because most of the mainstream stuff that we have today are just reboots and remakes. I like original ideas. Yours was an original idea, and it's going to be probably the top three movie of the year for me because
Oh wow.
I've always loved indie films over most horror movies now because everything is just rehatched nowadays
You know what?
for
Thanks for
me.
saying that because I feel the same way. It's rare that we get a unique, new, fresh creature in the slasher genre and the creature feature genre. Terrifier, when it came out with the first one, that was sort of the birth of a new sort of horror icon. But it took a few years for that to catch on. Really
Yeah.
with the second one, and now it's a franchise, and now there's an icon. But I hope that this is the beginning of something that can be a bigger Halloween special that we see more and more of. Because yeah, it's hard to have we don't see a lot of original creatures, and with this, I really tried to create a pumpkin monster that isn't just a jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah.
There's an instinct to just sort of if you're going to make a killer pumpkin movie, it should just be a jack-o'-lantern. That's the obvious idea, and we've had different versions of this design. That the short film had one version that had like eyeballs and teeth, and it wasn't a jack-o'-lantern. It wasn't a classic carved jack-o'-lantern. It was like a pumpkin monster. But with this, I wanted to do something that felt much more toxic and grounded, and something that felt more emotional. Like this is a creature that has actual real motivation. And even though it's inherently a ridiculous idea, the monster does have, in my mind, the monster does have real motivation, and it has real emotions, and it has a real justification for slaughtering and carving humans.
Yeah.
So I do think this creature is a unique design with its eye tendrils and its blossom. It's like weird and beautiful and toxic. Um, and I like it. It's creative, and I like that it walks around like a octopus or something, like a sea
It
creature, like a spider. It
basically what
moves.
it was. The one shot where it was running and you had the moon in the background, it looked like a spider to me.
Yeah,
And I was just like, that is phenomenal camera work
and
with that shot.
those shots are done 100% through puppetry. There's no CGI.
Really?
There's no CGI in those shots. Where when you see the pumpkin in its entirety through the binoculars, the Kevin character, he's watching it through the binoculars. You can see it sort of scurrying around.
Yeah.
That's 100% puppetry.
Wow.
Yeah, there's CGI. There's moments that are CGI when it's climbing through the back of the truck. Obviously, that's a practical truck driving. Like we're not hanging puppeteers off the back of that vehicle. That is a CGI pumpkin. And there's like two or three other full CGI versions of this creature. But for the most part, it's actually puppeteered entirely, and we puppeteered it on site, in camera as much as possible. And when we couldn't do that, it was puppeteered on a blue screen and composited in, but still practical. Even our blood,
Wow.
all the blood was done practically. I really didn't want to use digital blood at all. And there is, when you're creating a feature, a creature feature like this, and you have a monster, typically it's a man in suit or it's an actor playing a monster, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like Pennywise, Terrifier, like you have a man in suit, even like the original Alien movies. It's a man in suit. To try to create a pumpkin, this just basically this circular thing. It's a hunk of foam. To see it move and run around, it's really done with a lot of interesting puppetry. So what we did is we had our main puppeteer, Jonathan Craig. He would wear an easy rig. That's a piece of film gear used to support the weight of a film camera. He wore this easy rig that has a boom, reaches out over the top of his head with a cable that runs down, and the puppet would float on this cable, so the weight would distribute across his back and hips. And he was able to move this thing around from using an easy rig, and then we had to digitally remove the wires, and the vines were puppeteered with rods.
Really?
Like really, it's very much like just a Muppet approach, which I love. I grew up obsessed with The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth,
Yes.
and these movies that are so creative and inventive. And I just really wanted to keep it in that realm as much as possible. Like I said, even though it's a tiny budget compared to these other movies, that's how we approached bringing this pumpkin to life.
Because I would take this movie over anything else I've seen recently because like nothing is just, as we said, is nothing. There's nothing original. But for somebody like yourself to come out with an original idea like this is refreshing because it just feels like Hollywood is just it's basically like somebody walking down a library going, "Oh, what can we reboot or remake now?" And 9 times out of 10, they do more harm than good
Yeah.
with films like that.
Well, making a movie is very difficult and it's very expensive and it's very high risk, as you know.
Yeah,
And so if you're a studio or you're an executive or a producer and you're trying to create, a new film or you're trying to work with the business and make money, it's easier to lean into a franchise and existing properties. So it's lower risk. Nobody wants to take risk. The thing that's cool about Carved is that it wasn't because it's the smaller budget film, it's not really a big risk. And so working with Hulu was amazing because we had no creative differences with this movie. And the more we leaned into these kills being super violent and gory, the more sort of like positive notes I got. They were never trying to clip the wings of this feature. They're very supportive from the very beginning. It's super cool, kind of an indie filmmaker's dream to have the support of a major network studio that can help market and help pump the movie out to people, but not interfere with the creative at all in any way. It's actually incredible.
wow.
And that kill you mentioned, Shane's kill where he gets his puppet hand is torn off and he's forced to suffocate on his own blood. That is a horrific, dark idea.
Yeah.
And that idea came from one of our producers who was an executive on the film. It wasn't something I had in the script. It was something that was pitched to me and I was like, oh my God, that is so sick. I love it. And these are the types of ideas that came to me from my producers and from the studio. It wasn't, they were never trying to, tamper it down.
Wow.
Which so I'm very happy with that relationship, with the way that they supported me as a filmmaker. It's and I'm not just saying that, it's 100% true. And when I submitted the rough cut, I I got almost no notes back, and I was expecting like 20 pages of notes. They
Yeah.
were just so supportive. They're like, "This is fun, we love it," and it was just encouraging. And even all the way through the marketing with the trailers and posters, they would provide me options, and I was able to like make notes, and then they implemented notes I made. Just I didn't expect that, and I really respect that studio for handling filmmakers like that.
Oh
It
yeah.
makes me want to do more with them for sure.
Hopefully you. I really hope we get to see more from you, because if this is just the start of it, I'm wondering where else we can go.
Well, this is
Because
like I hope this is us just putting our toe in the water of the horror culture, and saying, hey, what's working, what's not working, and do we like this type of a creature feature that's also a slasher film? It's a hybrid, right?
yeah,
It's a creature that uses knives to slash people. It's unique in that way, I think. And you know if this works for people, if we like this, I want to make I want I'm hoping we can do much more with this. So
oh yeah,
we'll see how people respond to it. I love it. I mean, I collect monsters. So I've got, you can't see it in front of me, but I've got this collection of 18-inch creature, Movie Maniacs is called. Um, and I always try to every time I'm making a film, I always look up at the wall and think, can I create a creature that's worthy of being next to my Michael Myers, my Ash, my Freddy Krueger, all the Crow, all these characters I have here. And the pumpkin, to me, it just couldn't just be a jack-o'-lantern. It had to have some unique design elements that made it worthy of being, a new monster, not
yeah.
just a jack-o'-lantern, not just like a hunk of fruit, but actually an actual sentient monster. And
Where did you actually come up with the idea of having a pumpkin basically turn the tables on humans and carve them up like we carve them up every single year?
it seems like such an obvious idea to me. It's surprising this hasn't been done before. We've seen versions of killer pumpkins. The Simpsons had the Grand Pumpkin.
Yep.
Goosebumps has killer pumpkins. I actually haven't. I only watched the Grand Pumpkin recently when someone mentioned it to me. And it's like, oh wow, that's cool. Um, but it's weird that this movie hasn't been made before because it seems so obvious.
Yeah.
There's movies like Thanksgiving and Treevenge where there's revenge movies at Thanksgiving and Christmas. But Halloween is the scary season. Like, how come there's never been a pumpkin monster?
Yeah.
Um, and the idea originally came to me a long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. I used to work at a zoo as an exhibit designer. I used to design and fabricate artificial habitats as part of a team.
Wow.
And this zoo had an annual pumpkin carving contest between the departments. Right, you've got your like zookeepers, your maintenance department, the carpenters, and us, the exhibit designers. And every department would compete, and the guests at the zoo, the public, would vote in this big exhibition. They would vote on the best pumpkin carving, and every single year our department won because we were artists that could sculpt, and we would sculpt elaborate pumpkins. We took it very, very serious. And you'd win a pizza party. It was like a $500 gift card to this pizza place, and we were so competitive with this contest, and we won every single year. So we took it really seriously, and every year we would pitch ideas of what our pumpkin should be. And one year I pitched the idea that we should do a pumpkin carving a human, and to create a human that's photorealistic out of silicone, and then our pumpkin would be the sentient evil pumpkin holding knives, carving triangle eyes and blood, and actually have real gore. And my department head was like, this is a kid's attraction. We're not going to like have a gory scene like that. So absolutely not. Instead, we did an orangutan that was a life-size orangutan, with these huge gourds and carrot fingers. It was just amazing. And we won again that year. But the idea of a sentient pumpkin lingered in my head for so long. And then it was like 15 years later when I got this random call to pitch ideas for a short Halloween movie, because I had been making short films. You can see some of the posters here behind me. I
Yep.
Latched, this movie Cookie, this movie Point of View.
Cookie is my favorite.
Oh, thanks. I did all these horror shorts for a while, and I was in film festivals, and so out of this wave of short films I have in multiple festivals simultaneously, I got this call. They were looking for filmmakers that were doing shorts that could pitch 5-minute horror films for Halloween, which was this new short film kind of a Halloween special for Hulu, and it was a contest. And I immediately was like, oh my gosh, a Halloween horror movie. I got it. It's a pumpkin that carves people. So simple. And they said, great, we were going to, set up a Zoom for you to pitch to the studio, which was, at the time was 20th Century. And they had this division called 20th Digital that were doing these short films. Since then, it was bought by Disney, and it was, actually it was Fox Studios at the time. Then it was bought by Disney and turned into 20th Century. Anyway, I flew down and pitched these ideas. And one of them was a killer pumpkin, and that's the one that got greenlit. And that's how this whole thing got kickstarted. I just pitched it as a Halloween short, and they loved it. And then we ended up winning that contest for Halloween in 2018, which led to I got a bit of a cash prize out of it, and this development deal to sort of stretch it out into a feature. But the original seed of the idea was, it was like in the late 90s when I was working at that zoo. It was a long time ago, and just the image of a pumpkin carving a human head, to me was just fascinating. It's so simple.
Yeah. And to think nobody has ever thought of this in however many attempts at a new horror movie recently. Like nobody was like, pumpkin, Halloween, pumpkin, nothing.
Yeah, it's really weird that it's never been done. And I really wanted to release this next year, because we just shot it in April, right? Like I said.
Yeah.
And so our post-production schedule was just absurdly fast, much, much faster than you would normally have on a film like this. Obviously, like we had only, a few weeks to edit, we had like 2 months to do all the visual effects, which is just insanity. So obviously I was like, why don't we take the year and really work on this and release it in 2025 for Halloween. And the concern was someone's going to take the idea. Someone's going to make this movie. We got to put it out immediately. And so we all worked overtime. And did 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and just finished it for this season, because the idea is just simple and it's good, and someone else could have stolen it. But I'm very happy that we got this out to the world. The sentient murderous pumpkin has now been claimed.
Yes, and it's all yours. So if we see some ripoff or knockoffs, I know exactly who I'm texting and be like, your idea got stolen.
Yeah, it's out there now. So,
So with all your shorts that you've done, is there any chance that we can see more of your shorts making a bit like a feature film? Like Cookie, I would kill for a feature film of Cookie, because the last scene of that is what nightmares are made of.
I actually have a cookie jar sitting on my shelf over there. There's only I think there's only 8 in the whole world that were made of this cookie jar.
Oh my god.
Cookie, maybe. I mean, right now, clowns, you've got Terrifier, you've got Joker. It was the highest grossing horror film ever for so long, I think, until recently. Clowns, I think, maybe need to take a break for a beat.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of clown out there. I think maybe I'll circle back to that one day. But Cookie was just made as Cookie was made because I found that cookie jar in an antique store, and then it was so inspiring that 6 weeks later I had to finish the movie. It just so fast. I saw the cookie jar, bought it for $100. 6 weeks later, delivered the movie to film festival. Because it was so inspiring, and I shot it in one day. One long day and one long night.
It didn't feel like that.
Well, I storyboard every single shot of these movies, and so I work very fast.
Wow.
But yeah, Cookie has potential to be a feature. If I can think of an idea that is inspiring, that's worthy of, an hour and a half. And then Latched, I don't know if you saw Latched, the breast milk monster movie.
Yes. Talk about another original idea.
That one I think can just live as a short film. I made this with my wife and my child when he was 14 months old at my own property. That cottage is my own family island property. I just made that for fun, That's the thing. I started making short films because I love horror films. I love filmmaking. And I started making short films just as a hobby. And only in the last 5 years has it really started to turn into something much bigger. But it's through making short films that I was able to get Carved off the ground. But I also do, separate from Carved, I also do a lot of, other work in film. I work with Eli Roth often doing different projects. I worked on a couple TV shows with him that I wrote and directed. I also was second unit director on Thanksgiving.
I saw that.
And so I all of these opportunities making films and working in the genre I love so much has all come out of just making short films for fun. So anyone
Wow.
listening to this that is an aspiring filmmaker, or thinking about making a short film, to me, short films, when you make a short film, you're making a passport or a backstage pass. I always look at it like that. Like, you're not just making a short film, you're
Yeah.
making a backstage VIP pass that will give you access to an industry. And then if your film's good, you'll get into film festivals, you'll get to meet people, and then you make another one, and you just keep, creating stuff. And it doesn't take longer than a day or two, especially if you're making a very, concise short film that's 3, 4, 5 minutes. You can do that in one day. And then if it's good, you've got yourself a passport to travel into an industry that you love. And for years, I was just doing it for fun. And it wasn't until I started to win a bunch of awards and started to visit film festivals and meet people that I realized, ooh, this is a whole industry and a whole culture that I love. Because I was very busy doing television, working in Canadian television, doing, travel shows and documentary series. But my love of horror films pushed me into making shorts, which pushed me into these opportunities. Now I'm talking about doing Thanksgiving 2 with Eli. We're doing, I've got 2 other films I'm working on. Carved is out there. If I'd never started making short films, then none of this would ever happen.
Yeah.
It comes from pure love for filmmaking and for genre filmmaking specifically.
Did you have any favorite horror movies growing up?
Well, yeah. I mean, growing up, The Shining to me was my favorite movie ever. No, it was number one on my list throughout high school. I was obsessed with The Shining. The idea that you could just place a camera with a lens on an image and just linger on it and create so much tension with visuals like that was, to me, magic. And it was so scary and frightening. I think The Shining and Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, were the
Yes.
two that really actually affected me in like a real way, kind of changed me in some ways, changed my taste in things. Um, but horror films used to scare me, like, they, like all of us, that, when you're young and you're watching, certain films. Like, I actually was really terrified of horror films. I remember being afraid to watch Evil Dead and Army of Darkness. And finally, one day when I watched Army of Darkness, actually, I saw Army of Darkness before Evil Dead. I remember thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to brave this. And then I watched it and it was funny. I remember thinking, like, oh my God, this is so creative. This is so entertaining. And then that opened up another world to me that was like, oh, comedy and horror is interesting.
Oh yeah.
Then I went back and watched Evil Dead and I was like, oh my God, this is a masterpiece. This is a masterclass in creativity and filmmaking and being resourceful, and everything that I love about creative endeavors is packed into this franchise: Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. I think that gave me this like passion for very, you know, there's sort of two sides to my sensibility. One is I love dark, terrifying, truly grim stories like The Shining. More recently in films like Hereditary, Talk to Me. Love that side of it. But then the other side of me, I love comedy and my horror. I love Evil Dead. I love Beetlejuice. Even films like Ghostbusters. I used to watch Ghostbusters every single day.
Oh,
The
instant classic.
It's just such an amazing film. It's the parts in it that are, there's some legitimate scares in that when the dog's hands come out and grab Sigourney Weaver on the couch. I thought that was
Yep.
scary when the library ghost jumps out. I mean, these were genuinely, frightful moments watching as a young person. But also the comedy is fantastic and it's funny. It's just a great adventure. And so there's always these two sides to my sensibility where if I make a movie, I want it to be super weird and dark and horrifying. And I've done that before. I made a movie called Making Monsters, which is much darker. And, something like Latched is very dark and weird and twisted. But then I also love movies that are funny, like Carved or like Cookie, where there's a different sort of playful tone to it. And so I don't know, as I continue to make movies, those are the two worlds I want to explore. I hope to not just do comedy horror, and I don't want to just make dread fueled, you know, um, horror. I want to be able to do both depending on what the story is.
Yeah.
So you can
So
see that in my short films, and you can see that in the two features I've done. But yeah, that's I think it was The Shining, and it was Evil Dead, and it was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Elm Street's my favorite movie of all time for a reason.
I think Freddy actually is the best. A monster. Maybe the Alien Queen. as well, and along with Freddy, to me are my favorite movie monsters. I consider Freddy more of a monster than a slasher. He's kind of both, but to me, those two are the best.
Yeah, you can't have horror without those two. So my last question for you, because I am very interested to hear your answer to this one. If you were given any horror movie to remake or reboot, which one would you pick?
Well, it's Nightmare on Elm Street.
I would love for you to do Nightmare on Elm Street. Can we start a petition today on that one, please? Because I need to get that remake out of my head because that just wasn't it for me.
It's have you seen the documentary Never Sleep Again? It's
Yes.
like a 7 hour documentary on the franchise, or 5 hours or something. It's amazing. I watch it every year, once a year.
Oh yeah.
Every film is so inventive in its approach to the gags and to the kills. Especially, 1, 3, and 4 to me are the three that I love revisiting all the time. 3 and 4 are so fun and playful. The first one's the best, but 3 and 4 to me I watch all the time just for the inventive filmmaking, for the gags. That idea of haunting dreams, it doesn't get much more. It doesn't get much more inspiring in terms of a canvas for storytelling in the genre than that. Um, Now, it's got to be Robert Englund in that role, but he's now saying he doesn't really want to do Freddy anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's tricky with that franchise, and also there's everybody wants to redo that franchise. I don't think that'll really ever happen, but I do actually have an idea that is inspired by Freddy that I want to do. That is twisted, and I obviously top secret, but I think if I had to pick one, it would be that. It's
That
it's
would
just the most playful. It is funny. It is scary. It blends those two things together in a way that I love and appreciate. And it's just about the inventiveness of the kills and the creativity involved to bring those stories to life is what is attractive to me.
yeah, I saw that Robert Englund interview. I'm like, oh, we're never gonna get one again. But he said he would love to do an animated one though, that he can
Yeah,
lend his voice to. So
without him, I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky. You'd have to
yeah,
go the approach of like where everybody likes Tim Curry, and how do you bring Pennywise to life without Tim Curry? But then you see what was done with Andy Muschietti's version. It's just taking it in a whole different direction.
yeah,
And with Nightmare on Elm Street, it's risky to do that. People will turn against it. It's a huge swing, and with those big swings, you can miss. So it can be done. It requires a certain sensibility and the right actor and a whole different approach. You can't copy it. You've got to try to do something different. And I don't. And the last one that was done wasn't real. It didn't capture the same magic. It was okay. I actually thought it was okay, but it wasn't. I don't know. It didn't take off as the iconic thing. That's why it's a risky property without Robert in there.
yeah. It just didn't flow like all the other ones to me, and it's like it just didn't feel magical to me like the first one, the third one, because those are all untouchable in my opinion. Because you can never basically replace Robert Englund with somebody else like they try to do with the remake.
I think it can be done. I mean, look at the reboot of Evil Dead. It's like, can you make Evil Dead without Ash? And your first instinct
Yeah,
is like, no way, you need Ash. You need Bruce Campbell, Chainsaw Hand. But then Fede comes along and makes a version that works and is awesome because it's just a different approach. So it can be done. It can be done. But these are big swings. You know,
yeah, they're huge swings.
these are huge swings, and they can be huge misses. They can be huge successes. It all depends on so many factors. Um, that's what I like about Carved is that it's original and it's low budget, so it's not a big risk. If
Yeah,
people don't like this movie, we're not burning anyone's franchise. We're not burning anyone's fortune. We're not going to sink the studio. It's low risk, and because of that, we can take big creative swings with it.
yeah. Is there any plans for carved merchandise? Because I need a carved shirt or a poster on my wall ASAP. Because
You know what? I've made my own carved shirts and hats, and we've got these like baby pumpkins, right? Which
oh my god,
and I mean, I have all the props and everything at my house, and I agree we should have this, but we have to see how the world reacts to it. I mean, this thing just came out a few days ago, right? It's
Yeah.
only been out for a few days. So I think it, like Terrifier, it needs to build some traction. I think it needs to sink into culture a bit more and see where it lands. I think it does make a lot of sense to have merch, to have decorations, to have all kinds of fun stuff with this creature. Um, and I think if we get to do a second one and a third one, if we get to continue to build this thing out and build its scale and then maybe there is opportunity for merch, But at this point, this thing was literally just filmed in April, whipped together in a couple months, and then put out onto Hulu a couple days ago. So it's very, very fresh.
Wow.
It looks like a rotten, toxic pumpkin. It's a fresh beast.
Well, like I said, it's definitely in my top 3 for the year because this year hasn't been it for horror, man. Like, and to see your movie just hop on Hulu, I hope we get more films like this from you because I can only imagine where we're gonna go from here.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think this year there has been some decent horror this year. Like I really enjoyed. I would consider The Substance horror, for sure. Even have you seen The Substance?
I have.
Yeah, I really like that movie. And I thought Longlegs was really good, and there's been some other really great horror films this year. But I like that we're doing something different. We're not. This isn't trying to be an elevated, movie about trauma and grief. This isn't dealing with anything in that realm. This is literally just a throwback to old school creature features. That's supposed to be funny. It's almost a 50-50 balance between the comedy and the horror. And you don't see a lot of movies like this.
Nah.
And that's what I like about it. It is something that it's not going to appeal to everybody because it is funny. And, like the way Army of Darkness came out, it didn't really appeal to everybody. It didn't appeal to every critic. It didn't appeal to every horror fan. Some people are like, what the hell is this weird, funny thing? But over time, a kid like me comes along and watches it, and it opens up their whole world to the genre. And that's what Carved is. It's Evil Dead 2 in its wackiness. But it's going to take time for some people to appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I like that it's different from these other films. It's not trying to be that. There's a place for those movies, and I love those movies. Those are some of my favorite movies. Like I said, The Shining. I love Hereditary. Talk to Me. Those are the movies that I love as a fan, on one hand, and there's a place for that. And I want to make movies like that, and I do make movies I try to make movies like that in some of my shorts, and some of the movies I'm developing are very much like that, in that sort of elevated horror genre, going for true dread. But comedy horror, I love that I was able to put this out. I just watched it with my oldest kid the other day, and to see him light up to this, it's very inspiring to me that this is out for younger generations. This is the type of movie I would have loved as a teenager.
Oh, same.
And as a die-hard horror fan, like I said, it's not going to be everyone's, it's not going to be everyone's favorite movie. That's okay. It's going to divide people, and I think that's what these movies do. My inspirations for this was Slither. Movies like The Thing, Army of Darkness, Tremor. These movies came out and they weren't understood at first. It took a while for these things to become sort of cult classics and to be beloved. And I think that's what those are the movies that inspired Carve. So I hope younger filmmakers see it and inspires them to embrace old school filmmaking techniques. Embrace puppetry and try to create things in their own backyard. Because that's what Carved is. I made this with my 2 makeup artists that built the puppet, Alan Cook and Jonathan Craig, are 2 of my best friends. And this felt like movies I was making in high school, where you're with your friends, you're up all night long. It's extremely difficult. I didn't have support. I didn't have like a huge budget and a huge, I didn't have every tool. I didn't have access to every piece of software. This was very much done with an old school approach, and that handmade horror essence is what I love about this movie personally.
Yeah, because right now, I think it's one of my favorites of the year, and I hope everybody who listens to this will give it a shot because I truly think a lot of people are gonna sleep on this one because as you said, this is not everybody's cup of tea. But if you were a horror fan in the 90s, this should be right up your alley because you had Killer Tomatoes back then. You had the Thing. You said Tremors. Like you have everything 90s in this film, and that's why this will probably be my number one or my number two of the year, because this speaks to me in a different way, because that's why I love horror movies, because the 90s was a great time to be a horror movie fan, and this movie is right up there for me.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. And I used to watch all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, all the Evil Dead movies, just all the time. They were so exciting.
Oh yeah. I just wish I could take some people back to those days, because I think one of the problems now, I think time frames are killing movies, because if you take Nightmare on Elm Street to now, like somebody who's 16, 17 years old would be like, this isn't scary. But one of the biggest things that I've said on my podcast, I think time frames is what kills movies. But I think your movie is going to thrive from this generation if people give it the actual watch, which I hope you're listening and give this movie a watch.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's a much more broad horror film. You know, it's sort of a horror film made for a broader audience that might not watch horror films. So it's going to appeal to a lot of people, but it's also going to not appeal to certain diehard horror fans.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. That's what Carved is. That's what it was. That's what I intended it to be. And some of the filmmakers some of the best films to me, and some of my favorite horror films, were made by filmmakers that don't make horror films. Like Stanley Kubrick never made another horror film. He made The Shining.
And that was it.
In different genres, but that's one of my favorite movies ever. I also love horrific dark movies like Requiem for a Dream, but that's not really a horror film. Aronofsky isn't really a horror filmmaker, but that movie is one of the most horrific movies I've ever seen. It's a true horror movie where addiction is a monster. I also think Black Swan is a werewolf movie in some ways. It's a were-swan that she's transforming into. It's just it comes from this other place, and even though I am a sort of a horror filmmaker, this is definitely a movie made for people that wouldn't necessarily just always watch horror movies. It's a movie made for people that just want to have fun with a fun movie, and it's meant to be broad. So for all audiences across the world, and that's going to alienate some people. That's okay.
Say some horror movies aren't made for everybody. So thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me today, Justin. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love talking horror films. I love talking filmmaking. I love any opportunity to spread the word to young filmmakers to create short films, because without short films and without film festivals embracing short films and short film makers, we wouldn't have projects like this. We wouldn't have projects like Lights Out, or these other films that came from shorts like Saw. There's a lot of I hear a lot of producers and other people say, people don't watch short films. Just make don't waste your time with that. And I think it's not true. To me, like I said, you're making something that's going to open up a world to you, and you can do them very quickly. You can do them in a day. You don't overthink it. And I hope that Carved is inspiring for younger filmmakers to realize that and try to make their own short films and stick with it, because they're not going to be good at first. They're going to be terrible for a while until you learn some lessons, and then eventually your films get good if you continue working on them and continue honing your craft. But that's the message I want to put out with Carved for young filmmakers listening. Just try to make shorts. Embrace the idea they're going to suck at first, but stick with it. If you love filmmaking, eventually they'll get good.
Keep at it.
That's right.
Carved is now streaming on Hulu. Go watch it. Dude, congratulations. I can't wait to see what's next with you.
Well, I appreciate this. And me too. We'll see what happens. We'll see if there's a sequel. And then the other two movies I'm working on are very different. One is like a cosmic horror, and the other one is a revenge thriller that's very gritty. So we'll see. We'll see what's next. But I appreciate you having me on, Justin.
Of course, man. Thank you very much. And revenge thriller, you already got me in the door. Trust me. Thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.